Thank you for the questions. And finally, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Pfluger, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I couldn't agree more with my colleague, Mr. Tiffany, about that. Thank you for standing in the gap. And as a small correction to my facts on the 14 million, my point was to say that the Permian Basin is producing almost 50% of that, which is about 6 to 7% of the worldwide production. Just an incredible amount. Ms. Bentley, Permian Strategic Partnership is really a one-of-a-kind organization that's doing something that's supporting national security. If you can talk about the importance of national security, and then maybe give us a sense and scope of how many people are employed in the Permian Basin by this industry, and then the family members that are impacted positively by this industry. And I'll have a follow-up here in a second.
Thank you, Congressman Pfluger. Well, you said it best earlier when you said we are in the midst right here of the world's largest and most secure supply of energy for many reasons. But number two, I think it's important to remember why that is. And a lot of that is due to the hardworking men and women that every day go to work and produce some of the cleanest energy of anywhere in the country and the world as well. And so when we hear rhetoric from Washington, D.C., that that's not important anymore, you can imagine the effect that it has on a region like ours and, of course, across the country. But the truth of the matter is we know that the world is going to need our energy for decades and decades to come, so we keep at it. I will tell you also that when my companies are sitting around the boardroom talking, and I ask them what keeps them up at night, workforce comes up without fail almost every single time. We are worried about having the workforce for the future that we're going to need to continue to produce the energy that the world relies on. And so making sure that we have the infrastructure, both social and what we think of as traditional infrastructure, to sustain our workforce is becoming more and more important every day.
No, thank you for that. You know, if we go the path of Western Europe and we attack fossil fuels and we enact the policies that President Biden has done over the last 2 years, what's the economic impact here? I mean, Texas had $24 billion paid in from the oil and gas industry. $24 billion paid to the state in local taxes, state taxes that supported education, that supported roads, that supported infrastructure. So if we go the way, if we continue down this path, what's the economic impact we can expect?
You're exactly right. And we heard the good senator from New Mexico say earlier that oil and gas revenue is about a third, maybe a little over a third of New Mexico's state budget, and that's just our 2 states. When you look at the national level and globally, there's no other greater economic driver when it comes to energy than right here in the Permian. We employ, I think the statistic is nationally over 900,000 workers in the energy industry. And the revenue, of course, that comes from this area is paid off all the way down the chain, dividends over dividends over dividends. So we understand that while we're producing much needed energy, the economic, downfall that would happen if we keep seeing what we're seeing happen in Washington is that it's going to be devastating to all of us.
Senator, thanks for standing in the gap in New Mexico in a very, very tough environment. I can't for the life of me understand why you would want to cut off the funding stream that produces almost 50% of your state's budget. And it doesn't add up here. So thank you for what you do. Mr. Ackerman, same to you. And let's get back to those 9,000 permits. I cringe every time I hear those. And you just mentioned 30 to 50 permits per well.
Yes, sir.
I always come back to 9,000 and I say, well, we actually need 90,000 permits. I know that that's not accurate. Can you tell us how many permits we need in New Mexico and how many have been impacted? I mean, we talked about a production cliff. So how many permits do we need roundabout right now, new permits?
Wow. Thank you for the question. Honestly, if we just got the permits that are being delayed right now with challenges, APD challenges that are going on in Wyoming and New Mexico, Center for Biological Diversity and some of the other environmental NGOs that are challenging us, there's 400 APDs that are tied up there. The 10th Circuit of Appeals issue in the northwestern part of the state is challenging hundreds more. This could shut down production for a year. I've got companies up there. My chairman, my incoming chairman for next year is worried about whether or not his company's going to be able to operate because they're, like I said, it's $50,000 a day that you're committing to a well. And every day that well is not active, it's costing $50,000 a day. The ROI on that from a business standpoint just isn't there. When you start to look at the numbers that's necessary, we'll start with just what we have and be able to drill what we have and then look at where we can go from here. But honestly, what would help most is just to stop the feet dragging and the way that some of the challenges and something that could help us more than anything else is some clarity in the regulatory and legal environment, in legislative environment, so that there's not these holes that people can drive truck throughs and grab on and tie things up and slow us down.
Well, thank you for that. And the production cliff that the senator talked about, when supply starts to decrease and the price starts to increase, inflation will continue to increase. We know that affordable energy helps those who need it the most in the lowest earning bracket in our country. And I know, Senator, that you probably experienced that just like everyone who's elected experiences that. We need to unleash America's energy potential. It starts right here. It starts with permitting. It starts with doing things in a market-based reality, not this fictional green fantasy that my colleague mentioned. With that, Mr. Chairman, thank you for being in Odessa, Texas, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Pfluger. And now the chair is going to request if there's a second round of questionings. We have some time.